It's a race Italian fans hold close to their hearts. Milan San Remo holds a place as one of the monuments in the sport, and for that reason, every Italian cyclist dreams of winning La Primavera. Last year, Alessandro Petacchi emerged victorious in what was a very emotional finale.
And Alessandro Petacchi's get what he's dreamed about for many, many years. This man is now most certainly the fastest finisher in the world.
The Italian returns today with his new team Milram to defend his title. But he'll have to learn how to stop a torpedo. His main rival, Belgian Tom Boonen, is the man to beat this spring and has vowed to win here in Italy. And then there's the enigmatic Spaniard, 3 times a world champion, Oscar Freire, who claimed victory here 2 years ago and has shown with a recent win in Tirreno Adriatico, he's on form. Cyclism Sunday's coverage of the 97th edition of Milan San Remo is next on OLN. Well, the views are the same. Last weekend we were in the French Riviera. This weekend it's the Italian Riviera and the finish of the 97th Milano San Remo Classic. Hello everybody, I'm Paul Sherwen, as always joined by Bob Roll. And for the rumour mongers out there, Phil Liggett has not yet retired. He's actually in Australia at the moment for the Commonwealth Games, and he will be joining us very shortly when we move to the northern part of Europe for the Tour of Flanders and, of course, for Paris-Roubaix. But, Bob, I have to say, this has been a magnificent start to the season. The weather is ideal this afternoon for Milan San Remo. A slight tailwind for the riders, which is giving them very fast speeds, about 46 kilometres an hour for the first 3 hours of racing. But I have to tell you what, it really has once again been a start of the season for the Americans. Floyd Landis was absolutely phenomenal last week.
Floyd Landis demolishing the field in Paris-Nice on this stage number 3 in the Saint-Etienne. Only one rider able to get on his wheel from the Lamprey squad there. Fast Floyd Landis, the man from California, took the momentum from winning the Tour of California earlier in the year into Paris-Nice, becoming only the second American ever, but in 2 years' time, to win Paris-Nice. Great result for Landis.
Well, Landis leads now the UCI Pro Tour just ahead of Thomas Dekker, who won himself Tirreno Adriatico at just 21 years of age. But that, I'm sure, will change a lot, this standings, over the next couple of days. And Georgie Hincapie right up there, too, in 16th place. Well, if you want a favourite for today, my favourite has got to be Alessandro Petacchi. He's won 7 races so far this year, but he is the man who's got the power and the team behind him to win this race 2 times in a row, because he's going to be looked after here by a man by the name of Eric Zabel, himself a former winner of this race.
Paul, I got to disagree. Tom Boonen, my man, the Tornado from Belgium, world champion, and he is absolutely on fire this year, having already won 10 races this season. He is the fastest man on 2 wheels right now. It's 300 kilometers of racing with some tough climbs. I think that Tom Boonen is going to be the man to win this race. He will have to, however, be helped by this man, Paolo Bettini. The cricket is on good form. He won 2 stages on the gallop in Tirreno Adriatico, getting ready for Milano San Remo. He did have a crash, though, on stage number 3. He needs to help Boonen. Crafty Oscar Freire, the Spaniard from the Rabobank Dutch squad. He could also be a surprise, sneaking in there if any of the big names misfire. Watch for this man to come out of the woodworks. Oscar Freire, very fast, very tricky, and this is his kind of race.
It certainly is. It's a very long race, 294 kilometres. The riders leaving Milano in the morning, heading right the way down to the Mediterranean in San Remo. But it's the profile that makes this race difficult. At half distance, they've got the very famous Passo di Turcino, dropping the riders down into the Mediterranean. But the decision is always right at the very end with this series of capos. It's a one-day race, 294 kilometres or 183 miles, which is roughly the distance between Houston and Austin, Texas. 25 teams, 200 riders, a first place of €25,000, which is around about $31,500. And the king of Milan San Remo throughout its history would have to be Eddie Merckx, who won this race on 7 separate occasions. Well, now, with the action charging into the town of Imperia, we've just gone over the Capo Berta. These are the last 2 survivors of what was an 8-man breakaway. And the 8-man breakaway got clear after just 30 kilometres of racing, built themselves an advantage of 11.5 minutes at one stage. But, Bob, that is always par for the course here, isn't it? Milano San Remo is about the early morning breakaway, getting massive advantage, and then all of a sudden just getting gobbled up once we get down to the Mediterranean.
When you look at the race profile, 300 kilometers nearly of bike riding. You can get out there, get a big lead like the breakaway had, almost 12 minutes at one point. It's down to a lot less than that with just inside of 50 kilometers before the finish line. And it's no surprise when you see the pack being led by the Lamprey squad. They have their man Giuliano Figueras. He liked to do a good ride here. Of course, Quick Step has the reigning world champion, and it's the Milram squad, and they have none other than Alessandro Petacchi, the defending champion of Milano San Remo.
Well, that was Unai Echevarria who was in that leading group there with Mirko Allegrini. And it may well be that a couple more riders were just a little bit further back. And this is an aerodynamic position, which I certainly wouldn't like to try myself.
Don't recommend that for going down your driveway into traffic there, but the roads are all closed, presumably. Here's our two leaders just surviving off the front of a long breakaway with 8 men that have dominated the racing so far today. Testa della Corsa, that's the head of the bike race, and here's your two leaders.
Well, there in the wearing number 61 from Panari was Mirko Allegrini, but reminds me from when we raced in this bike race. When you come through town there, the road is always very damp around that fountain. It's always a bit tricky, isn't it?
And that's where Eric Decker came to grief a few years ago, snapping his femur.
Well, there you go. We almost predicted it. As we've said, coming round that area, it's a very dangerous point in the course. All of these riders are right on the rivet. That fountain, it's been there for years, and it has been the scene of some very nasty accidents. I can't see who that is who's gone down that hard, Bob, but that's what Milan San Remo is about. It's about crashes.
Oh, man, every single year we see it in this town, Imperia, year in and year out. That fountain right there, and it's just unbelievable amounts of chaos. There you see Massimiliano Mori from Naturino, Sapore di Mare, coming down there. No one else going down with him, oddly enough. Misjudged the corner and went straight into that traffic circle with the fountain in the middle. Very dangerous.
Very dangerous, very sad, but the race is on at the front, so we'll take a very short break and we'll come back with a lot more action from Milan San Remo. Also coming up on today's Cyclism Sunday, stage highlights from the week-long stage race in Italy, Tirreno Adriatico, where the sprinters always come out to play. Bob Roll takes a closer look at the big favourite in the peloton today, Italy's fast man, Alessandro Petacchi. And we'll update you on the latest positions of all the Americans around the continent this year as we gear up to the Tour de France. Plus the race unfolds here in Italy as the key climb over the Poggio approaches before the finish. That's all today on Cyclism Sundays.
Cyclism Sunday's coverage of the Milan San Remo on OLN is brought to you by John Hancock, Investments and Insurance. After every star hangs them up, someone must fill his shoes. The greatest riders in the world are about to collide. And one by one, the contenders will emerge. From the cobblestones of France to the mountains of Italy. Who will be the next king of cycling? Cyclism Sundays, the clash of the contenders. The Criterium International next Sunday at 5. Brought to you by John Hancock.
Welcome back to OLN's coverage of Milan San Remo, the first one-day classic of the calendar. This past week, most of the races have been competing in Tirreno Adriatico, which is part of the Pro Tour. Let's take a look. But while the Americans were dominating Paris-Nice, on the other side of the Alps, it was the first appearance this season of Ivan Basso and, of course, of Paolo Salvadelli in the great race between the two seas at Tirreno Adriatico, starting on the western coast, finishing on the eastern coast. And on day one, it was from Tivoli to Tivoli, a stage of 167 kilometres. And, Bob, not surprising, we can see a base race dominated by an early breakaway, but coming into town, the sprinters wanted to have their day.
Just 4Ks from the finish, catching the break. Here is the lead out coming for the Milram squad, but not enough. Paolo Bettini on the inside there for the Quick Step team. He was the fastest man on the day. Il Grillo, the cricket, getting his first win on the Tirreno stage and the leader's jersey. Look at that sprint.
Great win by Bettini, putting Berit Zabel into second place and Thor Hushoff, the big Norwegian, down there into third. And that made him the first leader of the race. Not surprising, starting the season off really well for Quick Step because a little further away, Tom Boonen had been dominating Paris-Nice. The second stage was another long stage for the riders from Tivoli to Frascati, a stage of 171 kilometres, marred in the early stages by crashes and, of course, the withdrawal of Stuart O'Grady, who crashed, breaking a collarbone and ribs. This is Luca Ascanti, who was going down quite hard as well. And on the way into town, it looked very much, Bob, as if Daniele Contrini was going to get the win.
Contrini just a couple of 100 meters from the finish line now. Don't look behind you, you will see this. Il Grillo again, the cricket in the leader's jersey, coming around from nowhere seemingly to win another stage, his second in a row.
Well, he's coming up to the line here to get himself his fourth victory of the season so far, and the season's only 2 months old, and that mainly indicates that at this point of the race, he was going to be a big favourite for Milano San Remo. And look at the acceleration as he comes out of the gap here, going across a 20-metre disadvantage there and just keeps going and going. Faster and faster as he makes his way up to the line. Even Eric Zabel could do nothing but just try and stay in his slipstream. And what a big gap. That really was a great move there by Il Grillo, getting himself the win ahead of Eric Zabel, who finished second, by the way, for the 8th time this season. And in third place, Mikhail Kalilov of Ukraine came across the line in third. Well, stage 3 was a little bit different. The riders faced a long stage, 183 kilometres from Avezzano to Paglieti. And in the early part of the race, the sadness was that Paolo Bettini had crashed out. And, Bob, it was another name sprinting to the line.
2 Spaniards coming to the line, 2 world champions, Oscar Freire and Igor Astarloa. Astarloa, Barlow World in the red, leading from the man in orange. And that is Oscar Freire, coming out of the depths of injury over the last few seasons, and a great stage win to get the leader's jersey into Tirreno Adriatico. Great little sprint by Oscar Freire, the former world champion.
Well, this was the first time Oscar Freire had won a race for over 12 months. It really is remarkable how enigmatic this rider is. He just seems to be able to bounce back from injury, and the victory on stage 3 made him the new overall leader, ahead of Alessandro Ballan and ahead of David Rebellin, who was starting to look quite threatening with the time trial coming up later in the week. Well, stage 4 and the riders will be very much based now for the final 3 days of the race on the Adriatic coast, from Paglietta to Civitanova Marche, 219 kilometres. But the big news on the start line on everybody's lips this morning was the whereabouts of Paolo Bettini, and his participation in Milan San Remo at this point of the week was starting to look in question. But Bob, charging into town once again, it looked as if Team Milram were getting it together for Alessandro Petacchi, but that was wrong.
Big lead out by Eric Zabel. Petacchi there on the left-hand side of your screen, but look out for Tor Hushov on the right-hand side. He's in the green and white jersey of Credit Agricole, just down to the wire. Great sprint here, and it's Tor Hushov getting the win by a micron.
By a micron. Look at this. That's Petacchi on the right-hand side. Hushov throws the bike, and in the dark blue jersey there in the middle, you might just catch a glimpse of a man by the name of Georgi Hincapie, because he finished in 5th place. Stage 5 was D-Day for everybody. It was the individual time trial around Cervigliano, a time trial of just 20 kilometres or 12.5 miles. And out on course, the Swiss national champion, Fabien Cancellara, wanted to get himself the win.
Cancellara did a great ride here. Oscar Freire, not noted as a time trialist, he's a sprinter. Cancellara getting the stage win for Team CSC. He said he was going to win, and he went ahead and did it.
He went ahead and did it, got himself the win, but he was a long way down in the overall classification. 3rd place by Thomas Dekker, just 18 seconds adrift, made him, at 21 years of age, the new leader of the event, with an advantage of just 14 seconds over Jorg Yats and Alessandro Ballan. Well, 1 or 2 riders breathed a sigh of relief on stage 6 because the mountaintop finish was cancelled, and for 1 or 2 of the sprinters, they would have a chance to chase down the breakaway towards the end. A 4-man breakaway dominated the race, but coming into the final few kilometres, there was a violent attack coming from the Cofidis rider, Leonardo Bertagnoli.
Bertagnoli launching from the peloton, getting a little bit of a gap. Milram controlling the sprint for Alessandro Petacchi, but they let it go a little bit too long, and Bertagnoli gets a very exciting stage win for the Cofidis squad.
Second win of the year for Bertagnoli, a winner just about 2 weeks ago of a race called the Haute Var in the southern part of France. But Alessandro Petacchi seems to be getting it warmed up. The final stage, stage 7, Thomas Dekker leads with 14 seconds over Jorg Yats. It was going to be a very precarious day of racing. Once again, the race dominated by a long breakaway, but when we started to charge into town, the blue train, this time, Bob, seemed to have it right.
Milram on the front of the bike race with Thomas Dekker, and here's the lead out. Here's Alessandro Petacchi, Allez Jet coming to the line, dominating that sprint and giving his teammates cause for celebration and reason to hope that Milano San Remo is going to go their way as well in a few days' time from the finish here.
Well, beating Robbie McEwen to the line and the Grillo as well, but this was a great win for Alessandro Petacchi. Win number 7 of the season and a great confidence booster leading into Milan San Remo. But the winner retained this name, Thomas Dekker, the youngest of all the Dekkers. None of them are actually related, but he's won this race by 14 seconds. And Bob, at 21 years of age, he has to be a star of the future. Great performance early on in the year by Paolo Salvadelli in 4th place. And looking a little bit further down, the start of the Americans this season is also looking rather good, because George Hincapie was 8th and Tommy Danielson, with a good individual time trial, finished Tirreno Adriatico in 10th. Well, back with the action in Milano San Remo, the 2 leaders, they're barely surviving. They've got at least 30 seconds advantage. As we go back, you can see Mori looking a little bit banged up. He will be okay. But Bob, it really is a very risky race. I remember one time of talking to a rider at the finish of the race saying he'd actually used a complete set of brake blocks up in one event.
So competitive, and it's so desperate, the riders trying to stay at the front of the bike race, that the riders in line behind don't oftentimes see all of the obstacles out on the course. Massimiliano Mori looks like a bit of a contusion there to the right side of his face. Coming to grief there on the curb. Terrible way to end Milano San Remo for any bike racer.
It certainly is, and now you can see a little bit of a return here. In fact, this is the return of 1 or 2 riders who were in that leading group. That's Ludovic Auger from the back, on the back there, from the Française des Jeux. Also getting in, Caleb Karlstrom of Liquigas. So this was after an attack on the Capoberta. We're now back to 6 riders in the lead, so 2 riders got caught out in the crossfire.
The Capi, all of the little peaks before the finish in San Remo are what define the end of this bike race. Taken by themselves, not very difficult, but when you add them up just before the finish, plus 300 kilometers nearly of bike racing, they are very tough climbs indeed. And the Capoberta sort of starts off the fireworks of Milano San Remo for the racers.
It certainly does. The Capoberta, followed by the Cipressa, and then finally what everybody's waiting for, the Poggio. Well, as we take a short break, let's not forget a name you might need to conjure up down towards the end is Thor Hushovd. He's already had a win just a week ago in Tirreno. We're back in Italy for the 97th edition of Milano San Remo on OLN. Today is the longest one-day race on the calendar, but next week we head back to France for a 2-day, 3-stage mini Tour de France, the Criterium International.
Criterium International is a good little race. It's got a flat stage for the sprinters, a hilly stage for the climbers, and a time trial, and that's where Bobby Julich excelled last year, winning Criterium International for the 2nd time in his career. But don't forget Floyd Landis, hot as a smoking gun. He might be the man to beat after winning Tour of California and Paris-Nice in succession.
So don't forget, next Sunday, OLN's in France for the 75th Criterium International, a 2-day race combining 3 stages, a flat one, a mountain stage, and an individual time trial. Cyclism Sundays on OLN next Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. We're looking down in the middle of the main field here. This is what the all excitement is about. Number 191 there, you can see just bumping shoulders with everybody. He's a man who we didn't even think was going to ride in Milano San Remo. Bobby doesn't look bad, does he? Paolo Bettini.
Paolo Bettini right in the mix there, leaning on riders. You can see just how incredibly competitive this race is. Riders diving in for every single open gap in the road, and it's so tough. And it's just incredible to see the peloton charging down these streets. I think you'd be hard-pressed to go as fast as the bike racers, even in an automobile on these particular roads.
Certainly, and there, seeing Paolo Bettini makes me think that my pick of the day, Alessandro Petacchi, he's going to get the win because he knows that Eric Zabel is definitely going to ride for him. Eric Zabel is going to lead out Alessandro Petacchi on the Via Roma, whereas Paolo Bettini is going to ride his own little race if he can, and that might create a bit of a problem for your pick, Tom Boonen.
Tom Boonen needs to have all of his teammates totally dedicated for his chances in Milano San Remo, just like you said, if he's going to have a chance to win. There's no question about that on the Milram squad. Zabel coming into the race saying, I am here to work for none other than Alessandro Petacchi.
We're about 5 kilometers away from the next climb. It's a climb that was put into Milan San Remo about 20 years ago because they wanted to stop this race being a race for the sprinters. The climb is called the Cipressa. And I tell you what, for a couple of years it did stop the sprinters, but now, Bob, the sprinters get over the Cipressa.
The sprinters are very fast climbers, and when we say that a rider such as Zabel or perhaps Robbie McEwen or Alessandro Petacchi are not climbers, that doesn't mean that they couldn't drop anybody on their very best day, except for the 0.1% of bike racers that are good climbers in the world.
This is a psycho race. You've got to be mad to ride at the front there in the first 15 or 20 places. Your hands are near your brake levers all of the time. You're listening for the noise of the squeal of somebody else's brakes, and that is the first warning that you get, and then you'll try and avoid a crash that goes down in front of you. There are many, many crashes in Milan San Remo. It's because it's the first big race of the year. The Gruppo di Testa, the front end of the race, you can see there, it was separated by 16 seconds now from the chasing group. Bob, this could all very much come back together on the slopes of the Cipressa.
It might very well indeed. Testa della Corsa, you can see the riders now not cooperating as much. A lot of attacking going on right now, and that's the Ceramica Panaria rider attacking. He sees that the peloton is not too far away, and he's just getting a few more minutes of television time. That's Mirko Allegrini from Ceramica Panaria, just trying to sneak away from the front, but I don't think they're going to be able to resist the peloton for very much longer.
And that's Daniele Contrini there in the black jersey of LPR. We saw him almost win a stage of Tirreno Adriatico, getting himself caught within the last 500 meters. Ludovic Auger in the white jersey here of the Française des Jeux. These riders now realize for them it's really just a question of survival, and the fact is they've taken the yellow car from behind, and there you can see the rest of the main peloton there just now waiting to pounce. Milano San Remo is basically all back together. So all the sprinters now starting to get very tense as we head down towards the finish in San Remo, and of course Robbie McEwen is a man who might like to get himself the win. Welcome back to Milan San Remo on Cyclism Sundays. With the season still in its infant stages, the Tour de France seems an awful long way down the road, but these races are very crucial in the preparation for the Tour in July. Let's just take a minute to update ourselves on the progress of the American riders on the circuit so far. Floyd Landis has started off well with a win in the Tour of California and, of course, in Paris-Nice. Bobby Julich didn't finish Paris-Nice, but was the winner of the opening day prologue. Chris Horner, a solid start for the year with him with a 10th place finish in Paris-Nice. Freddie Rodriguez not doing too well, pulling out of Tirreno Adriatico on stage 3.
Utah's Dave Zabriskie of Team CSC did not finish the Tirreno, pulling out on stage 6. Big George Hincapie rode a good time trial to wind up 8th place in Tirreno. Tommy D, his teammate on the Discovery team, was in 10th. And Levi Leipheimer, the American on the Gerald Steiner squad, did not finish Tirreno Adriatico, dropping out on stage number 7.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll keep following them throughout the whole of this season. It really is amazing. A couple of years ago, we could only talk about one or two Americans. Now, we're talking about a whole host of them. And there you can see the 4 leaders who escaped the race after 30 kilometers of racing, built up 11 minutes and 30 seconds, have just received that famous Italian sign, Bob, Gruppo Compacto.
Gruppo Compacto, the whole peloton together now. The breakaway has been caught. They were out all day long. That's great publicity for their teams. If you don't have a chance to win a very fast sprinter or one of the big guns of cycling, you might as well send some of the lesser names out on a breakaway, and that's what those teams did. But now it's all back together. 2 more climbs before the finish. The very famous long, tough Cipressa, and then, of course, the world-famous Poggio climb, sweeping descent, and just a couple of 100 meters after the bottom of that to the finish line in San Remo on the Via Roma.
Well, sorry about the little bit of picture breakup, but these are live pictures coming to us, and I have to say, Bob, I was just thinking over the St. Patrick's Day weekend there was your man, Tom Bonin.
Tom Bonin, he was in the World Champions jerseys. Those are the rainbow stripes on the white background. That differs from the dark blue of his teammates on the Quick Step squad, but he will be their defended man. Paolo Bettini, a little bit of a wild card for Quick Step. He needs to cooperate with Tom Boonen and do a big lead out if he's going to have a chance to beat Petacchi. Let's be realistic.
Let's be realistic, because Eric Zabel is going to look after Alessandro Petacchi. Eric Zabel's won this race on 4 occasions in the past. He knows how to get over the Poggio, he knows how to get over the Cipressa, and he knows exactly how to lead out the sprint towards the line. I think actually Eric Zabel should have won it on 5 occasions. He put his hands up a little bit too early once.
He did indeed, and that was to the horror of his squadron. He was on T-Mobile at that time, who he had raced for his whole career. He's come on the new squad, Milran, along with Pataki, and always a little bit extra incentive, especially towards the twilight of your career when you change teams.
Oh, Bob, it's getting a bit nervous now, isn't it? You can see Liquigas moving up on the right-hand side. The reason it's getting nervous is we're coming up to a right-hand turn, and that is the start of the Cipressa. And that, I think, is where... Oh, look at that. Everybody's taking risks. This is a mad race. It's a great race. It's a race that I love, you love, because of the excitement, because of the risks. These riders, although some of them are not very good climbers, they want to get round this corner here in the first 10 or 15 places, and this is what it's all about. This is the Cipressa.
This is a huge battle for position. You can see attacks now coming, and that is to try to separate a little bit, to chop it up for the sprinters. They want to sit on and keep things together, and then the breakaway artists want to have a very tough tempo on the Cipressa climb if they're going to have a chance for the win.
Well, Liquigas there trying to move their man Paolini up to the front. He's finished on the podium here before. There's the Cipressa, the little indication on the right-hand side. These guys have been hammering along the flat part of this road. Now, all of a sudden, they turn to the right. They climb up to around about 250 meters above sea level. Doesn't sound like it's very much at all, does it? But when you've been racing for almost 6 hours, it really hurts. And look at that on the front, Paolo Bettini.
Paolo Bettini has come to the front now. Gerolsteiner off the front, and here's an attack by Liquigas. Paolo Bettini, they're right on the front of the peloton. Look at the attack, and now looks like Pelizzotti going off the front now.
Well, this is a very good move here by Liquigas, trying to set this up. You know, this is the sort of team that we could see creating a surprise, and I think, Bob, that was Stefano Garzelli.
Garzelli, the Giro d'Italia winner, going off the front. Here comes a Barlow World Chaser. That might be Iwer Astarloa from that squadron. And this is a very solid breakaway. Let's see if Paolo Bettini continues these attacks.
Well, Stefano Garzelli has gone out on the attack. It's a very good place to go out on the move here with a man like that, because this could be the great surprise. This is a replay of how he moved away, and this was a good move by Liquigas. We'll take a very short break and come back before the top. Well, we might have talked about a lot of enigmatic bike riders, but one man who'll be looking to create the surprise here in Milan San Remo is Oscar Freire. A couple of years ago, he beat Eric Zabel to the line in quite a shock. Welcome back. You're watching the 97th edition of Milano San Remo here on OLN. I'm Paul Sherwen, joined by Bob Roll. I'll tell you what, Bob, this is a race that the Italians love.
The Tifosi come out in droves to worship the sprinters in Milano San Remo year in and year out. This is the biggest one-day race in Italy.
Stefano Garzelli talking to his teammate Magnus Backstedt before the start this morning, Bob. He said Stefano Garzelli is our man today, but it's an awful long way to go from the top of the Cipressa right down towards the valley, along the Mediterranean again, then over the Poggio, and hope to survive to the finish, because this main field is going to be screaming at 40 miles an hour.
Peter Vrolik was the Gerolsteiner rider. That was on the wheel of this man, and that is Stefano Garzelli, and he is putting in some time between himself and the peloton. He'd love to see a breakaway succeed. If not, he has no chance against the sprinters, so that's why the big attack's on one of the last obstacles in the race, second to the last, and that's the Cipressa climb, a very tough little climb. They go away from the sea, up into the hills, and then come sweeping back before one more climb to the finish. Rabobank on the front of the peloton now. They want to bring it back together for Oscar Freire, who's won this race just a couple of years ago.
Well, that's Mark Wouters on the front there, the former national champion of Belgium in the individual time trial, just making sure he keeps the tempo out. They're obviously thinking about their man, Oscar Freire. Everybody now scrambling to stay in the first 15 or 20 positions, because once they get to the top, Bob, it's a scary descent off this climb.
This is a very tricky technical descent before they get back to the coast. Here's Garzelli up at the front. He's trying to get some distance between the peloton. You can see Paolo Bettini, the quick-step rider in the gold helmet. He won the Olympic road race a couple of years ago in Athens, Greece, and now he's right at the front of the peloton. He hasn't made any attacks, so it makes you believe that perhaps he's working for Tom Boonen after all.
Corda del Gruppo, the back end of the race, only 30 kilometers an hour, around about 20 miles an hour of racing here, because we're going slightly uphill. But you know, as we look at Stefano Garzelli here, about to get caught by the main field, Bob, it is so important, isn't it, to have a team when you want to win a race like this. Two teams are going head-to-head here this afternoon as we look at the action at the front. Team Milram against Team Quickstep. Tom Boonen against Alessandro Petacchi.
One of the big clashes of the year, and a couple of things that you might want to think about is their lead-out men, Eric Zabel for Petacchi and Matteo Tosato for Tom Boonen. But the wild cards have got to be Martin Den Bakker and Paolo Bettini, respectively, for Milram and Quickstep. Bettini has to work for Tom Boonen for him to have a chance to win.
Well, I'll tell you what, Martin Den Bakker is a very old, seasoned professional bike rider, knows exactly what to do and he knows exactly where to be at the right time. We're looking here now at a very interesting move from Gerolsteiner, Andrea Molletta. He's an Italian rider on the German squad, and it may well be that he too is trying to create the surprise. Moving up there as well, the leader of Team Cofidis now. He's had a very good start to the season. Leonardo Bertagnoli wears number 71 there in the red, white and blue jersey of Team Cofidis. A winner of a stage in Tirreno Adriatico, a winner of the Haute Var Classic in the southern part of France. He reckons, Bob, he's got the acceleration on a climb like the Poggio.
Molletta there, a good little breakaway. We also saw Vladimiro Gusev from the Discovery team. He's got a very fast man in Max van Heeswijk on his team. And Discovery now coming to the front, also controlling a little bit of the tempo, as we see a little bit of a breakaway here by Andrea Molletta. His teammate, Davide Rebellin, he's the Italian on the German Gerolsteiner squad. He would love a crack at winning Milan San Remo.
Just a quick glimpse there in about 20th place. I could see the jersey of the world champion, Tom Boonen, climbing very well. There he is, all over the bike, just a fraction, but it's amazing how strong these riders are nowadays. A few years ago, the sprinters couldn't get over climbs like the Cipressa. That's why it was introduced into Milano San Remo. There is Paolo Bettini. Man, Bob, for a guy who was down and out just a week ago, this is amazing.
We saw images of him from the gurney in the hospital just a few days ago. He's made an incredible recovery through the week. He said he was ready to ride. He wasn't sure after his crash if he could do it, but Bettini right in the thick of the action. There's Filippo Pozzato. He'll be a lead-out man for Boonen as well. Boonen looking very strong in this climb. Obviously not noted at his climbing skills, but he is right up there in the front.
And as we continue our march towards San Remo, don't forget the march to the playoffs has begun and every point counts. Tomorrow, scoring leader Jaromir Jagr and the Rangers host the Bruins. And on Tuesday, Sidney Crosby and the Pens face the sizzling Senators. This week on the NHL on OLN, home of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Well, they're all over the front end of this race. That was Kurt Adler-Arvidsson there from Team CSC. Look at Tom Boonen here. Bob, it's a fantastic sight, isn't it, really, to see the World Champions jersey at the front of the bike race. The orange and blue jersey right behind him, Oscar Freire, the enigmatic Oscar Freire, the man who on many occasions has fought his way back from injury. But, Bob, you were the one that reminded me of the last time a world champion ever crossed the line in first place in Milano San Remo. It's a long time.
It's been a very long time. I think it was the great Giuseppe Saroni, the Saronissimo, they used to call him, the great one. And he was world champion, coming across the line first in Milano San Remo. Of course, Eddie Merckx did it on a number of occasions in the Rainbow Stripes, but it's been a very long time, over 20 years, since we've seen the world champion reigning win Milano San Remo.
Well, Eddie Merckx just conquered this race every time on just a 4-kilometre section, didn't he, Bob? It was always on the descent of the Poggio. He could take off and go downhill faster than anybody else in the world.
Eddie Merckx said he loved this race so much because he started the morning in the wintertime in Milan and came out to the finish line in the summertime in San Remo. 300 Ks from the very heart of the northern part of the country in Italy all the way down to the Costa Azzurra and the beautiful scenery here brought to you by the Mediterranean Sea, just on the left-hand side of the racers at the moment.
Yeah, look at the chaos at the back. This is what the Cipressa is all about. Everybody right now is sitting on the front end of their saddles, just holding on, hoping to stay in contact. I think I just caught a glimpse there of Alexander Vinokourov going backward. Now, that's a bit of a surprise. Not raced all that much so far this year. Said he's changed his tactics. He wants to prepare himself for the Tour de France in the month of July, so therefore his season has been backed off a fraction. We're getting now into the town, right at the top of the Cipressa. We've got around about 1 kilometre to go to the summit, and then, Bob, it's hell for leather all the way down.
It is absolutely, totally flat out in the descent. Very technical, lots of hairpin turns, switchbacks as they're called, off camber, very narrow roads, and breakneck speeds by the peloton going down. There is your man, Paolo Bettini, winner of this race a couple of years ago. He's Tom Boonen's teammate, and for Quickstep to win this event, he needs to work for their team leader, and there he is in second position, So far, Tom Boonen is putting in a perfect Milano San Remo.
And Bettini there in third. You recognize Bettini because he's got the golden helmet. He wears that golden helmet as a reminder to everybody that he's the current Olympic Games defending champion, a title he took in Athens a couple of years ago on a beautiful performance, taking out actually with about 2.5 laps to go, something that shocked everybody. That was a risky thing to do on that occasion, and many of his successes have been taken from risky decisions.
Well, it was a very questionable decision, but Bettini felt the power in the peloton, felt the power waning, thought that he could make it all the way to the finish line, and absolutely destroyed the field.
Well, they're not too far away from the summit now, Bob. Look at this. This is the move. Look at Paolo Bettini moving around the outside there. I think Bettini today has decided he's not riding for himself, and that could then tip the scales of the advantage across to Bob Roll in the stakes here, because if Bettini decides to work for Tom Boonen, Boonen certainly has got a great chance of winning.
You can also see the Milram riders in the light blue shirts. They'll be leading out. Pataki, of course, and Alessandro Pataki can just look up right in front of him and see big Tom Boonen. Tom Boonen, a little bit extra incentive in Milan San Remo, wearing the rainbow jersey as world champion, also having a horrible sprint in last year's Milan San Remo. He had totally botched it and finished 8th.
Well, this is chaos. This is the Cipressa. We're just about to start the descent. They're just going through the town at the summit here, and then all of a sudden you'll get a chance to see how scary this descent is, away and back down to the Mediterranean again. Bob, this is going to be a great finale, because I'm going to see now a great challenge as we start the descent of the two men at the top, Boonen against Pataki, age against experience. We'll take a quick break, and there's plenty of more racing left to come. Don't go too far away. Welcome back to Cyclism Sunday's coverage of Milan San Remo on OLN. Earlier on, we saw highlights from Tirreno Adriatico, but after looking more closely at these races, you'll see there's a little bit of a link between Milan San Remo and Tirreno Adriatico.
Paris-Nice and Tirreno Adriatico overlapping a few days, so the riders have to pick one or the other to get ready for Milano San Remo. If we look down the results of Milan San Remo, we have to go all the way back to 1999 to find a winner that did Paris-Nice as a preparation race. That was Andre Chamil, but I think it's going to happen again this year with Tom Boonen.
Well, I don't know. My man Alessandro Pataki, he rode Tirreno Adriatico as part of his preparation. But that is an interesting point you bring up, Bob, and one that Alessandro Pataki has in his favour, because he's fresh off a stage win at Tirreno Adriatico. Bob, it's got a little bit more about the sprinting superstar.
32-year-old Alessandro Pataki is the fastest man on two wheels. In his 2003 breakout season, the Fassa Bortolo rider claimed 6 stage wins at the Giro d'Italia, 4 stages at the Tour de France, and 5 more stage wins at the Vuelta a España. In total, 15 combined wins in the 3 Grand Tours, a modern record which should not be matched anytime soon. His success continued the following season as he conquered a record 9 stages of the Giro d'Italia. In 2005, he reached another milestone, taking the first classic of his career with a win here at Milano San Remo. He chose to skip the Tour last year, but grabbed 4 wins at the Giro and 5 more at the Vuelta to equal 26 wins on his resume. When the Fassa Bortolo squad folded last year, he signed up to ride for Team Milram, who recruited veteran sprinter Eric Zabel to be Pataki's main lead-out man in the sprints. Pataki came into the season 6 pounds lighter, and so far he has already notched 7 wins, most notably the final stage at Tirreno Adriatico just last week. Pataki now carries the torch handed down to him by the retired superstar of the sprint, Mario Cipollini, and the Italian tifosi worship their modern-day sprinting legend. Stage race wins in the Grand Tours are fine and dandy, but Pataki must win here today for his people, his team, and most importantly, himself.
Well, thanks, Bob. I tell you what, though, I do think that Alessandro Pataki's got the edge there, because my man Eric Zabel is going to lead him out towards the finish. Well, we're now on the descent of the Cipressa, charging down towards the Mediterranean. We've got then around about 10 kilometres along the flat, alongside the coastline, before taking another right-hand turn and heading up towards the summit of the Poggio. This is Matteo Carrara. Not much of an advantage for him, and he's being chased down, nailed down by none other than Paolo Bettini.
Paolo Bettini knows these roads very well. He's an Italian on an Italian and Belgian squad. Quick Step. He has brought back Carrara directly back into the fold. Bettini, one of the best descenders in the game of cycling, and he is controlling the head of affairs here for Quick Step team. You got to give a little bit of an advantage now because of that to Tom Boonen and his teammate.
You've we've got to give something as well to the team management of Quick-Step, because they have managed to bring two leaders to the event. A one-man, Paolo Bettini, not in the best of shape, having crashed in Tirreno Adriatico, is dedicating himself here to Tom Bonen.
Most definitely. You can see that in the way he's pedaled up the Cipressa, not making any attacks and just controlling the tempo of the whole peloton. Look at this road here, very tricky descent.
Yeah, but Bob, you ride motorbikes an awful lot. It's amazing, isn't it, that the motorbike cannot get away from the bike riders on this descent.
It's incredible. The machines that the rider's using, a little bit lighter than the motorcycle. Of course, the contact patch of the rubber on the road, not quite as big, but these riders so skilled, so technically advanced that they can stay right up with the motorcycle.
Oh, they certainly can. And you know that I've ridden down many, many descents in the Alps and the Pyrenees, and the motorbikes are actually touching down in the corners, trying to get away from the bike riders who are going down this descent here at speeds approaching around about 45 miles an hour. That looks like Jorg Yachts there in the dark blue jersey of Liberty Seguros. He rode a very good Tirreno Adriatico, finished second overall, so he's in fine form. But this is dedication. This is why so many times people say to us, Bob, but cycling's an individual sport. It's not, is it? Because Paolo Bettini today has decided he wants to dedicate the win of Milan San Remo to Tom Bonen.
Tom Bonen is the man. He is on fire so far this year. After winning the Worlds, he's won 10 races in the meantime. I think he's only started about 14 of them, so that's an incredible winning percentage. There's Bettini. Look at that descending technique, using the whole stretch of that corner to get around, back to the apex, diving down the Cipressa descent. They'll come back to the Mediterranean, go about 4, 5, 6 kilometers, and then straight up the Poggio.
Well, they're all together. All the big names are in with a chance of winning Milan San Remo still, as they're just about to end the Cipressa. Well, we've seen a lot of riders very consistent in the sprint over the last couple of years, but one man who has been almost untouchable since the arrival of Tom Bonen is Alessandro Petacchi. He wants to win again. Well, what a great picture to come back onto here. The man at the front of the race, Paolo Bettini, just a few days ago on the ground and out of Tirreno Adriatico. Here, whipping up the pace, making at the front end of the main field. There's Tom Bonen over to the left-hand side. You can see Team Milram, that's the pale blue jersey. That is one of the teammates of Alessandro Petacchi. And Bob, this is going to be a master creation here as we get ourselves coming up to the Poggio. We could have a very serious lead out on the streets of the Via Roma with Milram going up against Team Quick-Step.
Koos Moerenhout there putting in a little attack for Phonak. Probably won't get too far. You can see the sprinters teams queued up at the front to try to chase down anything like that, and especially Paolo Bettini at the front. Damiano Cunego as well. And there it is, Koos Moerenhout. A little bit of a gap. It's a flat road, like we were saying before the last climb of the day, the thrilling and very steep, tough Poggio climb that is the hallmark of Milano San Remo.
Well, that's Frank Schleck there, the Luxembourg national champion. Rode a very good Paris-Nice just recently. He's in fine form, the son of a former professional teammate of Eddie Merckx years ago. Now, this is a good move here, and this is the section of road between the bottom of the Cipressa and the start of the Poggio. That's the Poggio just over there in the distance. This, Bob, could be the surprise that catches the sprinters out, but I don't think they're going to be robbed today.
Quick-Step rider, Koos Moerenhout, opening up a little bit of a gap. Quick-Step just covering this breakaway. That rider won't do any work at all. And Iles Baleadas in there, Koos Moerenhout, as well as Frank Schleck from Team CSC. If they don't cooperate, the chances are very, very slim that they'll be able to stay away.
Well, we've been away for a long time. The riders started from Milano this morning. They've went all the way across the flatlands. They climbed over the Turchino. Right now, we've been through all of the capos. We've been over the Cipressa. We're down on the flat section between the Cipressa and the start of the Poggio, and that is going to be the final climb of the day. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows with 10 kilometers to go, the race could be won and lost there. Well, there's a slight flurry of attack off the front end of the group here. They're all trying to line themselves up for the Poggio. Look at the length of riders. They're all over the place here. There's the small group which has been splintered off the front, and that was because of the descent of the Cipressa. A lot of player blue jerseys there. I can see Alessandro Petacchi is in this group, and I think that group behind will just make the junction as we start the Poggio. Well, the sprinters now are certainly starting to queue up, and one man who might spoil the Italian party here this afternoon is Bob's pick, Tom Bonen. This is a leading group of 4 riders now. Vicente Reins has got himself in there from the Case d'Epargne Il Baleares. This is Frank Schleck, the Luxembourg national champion from Team CSC. This is Koos Moerenhout, the man who started the move. That's Reins, and also just getting on the back there, Guido Trenti, who rides with an American license, but of course his Italian is a little stronger than his American accent.
Don't think he's ever been to the United States, actually, but he has the racing license from the United States to help him with the world selection. That used to be a lot easier, but so many good Americans in bike racing now, it's not so easy to make the American Worlds team. And he's covered this breakaway, and just so that he can not cooperate with the riders in front, he's going to sit on the back, and then they'll be a little bit more discouraged. And if it comes down to this breakaway staying away, of course, it would be Guido Trenti having a great chance to win. And that's a tactical card being played by the Quick Step team. They won't have to chase as hard either. That'll go down to Milram. Frank Schleck, he loves Italian racing. He loves to be here in Italy. And he was 3rd in the big classic at the end of the year in Italy, the Giro di Lombardia, nearby this area, just a little bit further to the east. But we are steaming towards San Remo right now. Koos Moerenhout, Guido Trenti, Victor Reines in the breakaway.
And as these riders head down towards San Remo, don't forget tonight on OLN, the battle for the buckle continues in Tacoma. Who will make the 8 and ride victorious in the championship round? It's the roughest 8 seconds in sports. The PBR built for tough tonight at 9 p.m. on OLN. This leading group of 4 riders, Guido Trenti at the back, Frank Schleck, Vicente Reins, Koos Moerenhout, have got themselves a fairly serious advantage here, and that's actually rather a small group there.
That's a very select group of 4 riders in the front. Guido Trenti very astutely getting on the back of that. That's a good move for the Quick Step squad. He won't work at all because they want Tom Boonen, if it comes down to a sprint, to have the best chance possible. But the 3 other riders, including Frank Schleck, who is quite a strong cyclist, one of the future stars of the sport, having a great time. It's been such a very fast Milan San Remo, incredible average speed so far, and the chase mostly being done by the Milram squad, who are still on the front, and the Quick Step riders have now turned off the gas. They're not working, so the breakaway looking pretty good here.
Well, it's looking good, but you know what? The acceleration once that main field hits the Poggio is going to be phenomenal. This is the leading group of 4 riders. They go through that small tunnel. I'm sure we'll get a little bit of picture breakup. Once they've gone through the tunnel, they've got around about 3 kilometers at the start of the Poggio. Look at this acceleration again. These are the riders of Il Baleares, Case d'Espagne, trying to get the motorbike away because he reckons that they are in fact racing the speed in the main field. I just caught a glimpse of Tom Boonen riding about 10th position, but Bob, this is a great team. This is the first time we've really seen the control coming from Team Milram. Let's not forget, in the lead, Moerenhout, Trenti, Reins and Frank Schleck. But I tell you what, it's going to be a humdinger when they get to the Poggio.
Marco Velo, Fabio Sacchi, Martin Den Barker, Alessandro Cortinovas, Eric Zabel, of course. He'll be sitting back a little bit and not doing any work until the very last kilometer of the bike race. And so far, Team Milram has ridden a perfect Milano San Remo. But look at this breakaway, still out in the front and still increasing their advantage. Quite remarkable when you consider how fast the peloton is going.
Well, there are 4 leaders now, and the next thing they will be facing is going to be the Poggio, and that is when behind the race was certainly going to get unleashed. Different team coming to the front end of the peloton now. That is Gorej Stangelaj, the rider from Slovenia, from the Team Lampre, trying to whip up the pacemaking too. They're wondering whether or not their man Giuliano Figueres has got the chance to surprise them all on the slopes of the Poggio. Or why not Damiano Cunego, Bob, in his first ever participation in this great classic?
Damiano Cunego, the big star, young rider, used to be teammates with Gilberto Simoni. Simoni's gone over to Saunier Duval. Advantaggio is 22 seconds. I almost said 22 secondi. In Italy, that's what they would have said. 22 seconds, so a good little gap for these riders. I think they're going to need more, about 4 minutes to stay away, though, before the finish line.
Well, 22 seconds at speeds like this corresponds to around about 400 yards. And as we move forward, we're going to see whether or not that 400 yards is still being held. The riders now going through this very interesting part of Italy where all of the greenhouses you can see on the side of the hills there are opened up to the summer sunshine to grow flowers to be exported to the rest of Europe. Today, they are the home for this great classic, the great showdown, the first big showdown of the one-day races of the world, the Milano San Remo, La Primavera, the Springtime Cup, if you'd like to call it. And we're waiting to see now whether it's going to be a showdown between Tom Boonen and Alessandro Petacchi. Bob Boonen cannot get out of the top 10 places. He is stuck there.
He is planted right there. He knows to stay out of trouble and to stay in good position. The battle for position so critical in Milan San Remo because of the last two climbs out on the bike course that you need to stay right in the front.
That was Frédéric Guédon trying to get off the front there. He's actually had a pretty good start to the season. He's in good form. A man himself who in the past was a winner of the Great Paris-Roubaix Classic. That was a bit of a surprise on that occasion, but whenever you read through the history books, the name Frédéric Guédon will always be there. It's a bit of a crazy move here. He's trying to get around the corner at the start of the Poggio just ahead of the main field because, Bob, when they take that right-hand corner, and there it is now, it's chaos.
It's absolute chaos, total pandemonium. Such a battle for position because you don't want to get caught behind any crashes. And so the riders desperate to stay in the front. Tom Boonen so far riding a perfect race. Koos Moodenhout, they're on the front of the breakaway, but look at the peloton starting to their climb of the Poggio. Inizio del Poggio, that's the initial parts, the very first slopes, and Rabobank on the front. Oscar Freire is their sprinter. He's on good form, won a stage at Tirreno, and has won Milan San Remo before. 9 kilometers to go to the finish for the breakaway, and the peloton just behind them.
Well, let's not forget, in the lead, Trenti, Vicente Reigns, Koos Moodenhout, and just getting onto the back there as well, you can see Trenti in the blue and white jersey, not done anything at all, but now you can see the big organisation coming to the front here. This is Eric Decker, not Thomas Decker. Decker himself a man for the start of the season, but he today is part of that team strategy, trying to get Oscar Freire into an ideal position for the sprint. Bob, the gap has come from 22 seconds to 13 seconds, but if they go over the top with 10 seconds, they've got an advantage and they've got a chance still.
If you have just a few seconds, because of the technical nature of the descent, you don't need such a huge gap to stay away to the finish line. The finish coming just a few hundred meters from the bottom of the descent of the Poggio. This is one of the most famous climbs in cycling, and this is the peloton going at full speed up the slopes of it, all in the big chain ring, absolutely flying down the Poggio right now.
Well, right now, as we look at this leading group of 4, the gap is coming down dramatically from 20 to 15 to 13 to 10 seconds as we look. And you can be absolutely certain the 2 men who want to win this race, Alessandro Petacchi and Tom Boonen, have got to be riding, Bob, in the first 10 or 15 places, trying to make sure that they don't start building up lactic acid by pushing themselves too far too soon.
Frank Schleck on the attack now. He's just separated himself from the riders that was with him from a moment ago in the breakaway. Frank Schleck, one of the up-and-coming stars, Team CSC. Team CSC used to dominating the early season, hasn't gone that way so far for them. Flat-out effort now by Frank Schleck. That is a great move by the man from Luxembourg on the CSC team.
This could be the move to create the big surprise for all the sprinters. Look at these corners. Oh, and he's gone around that very rapidly indeed. This was the acceleration just a few moments ago. He looked over his shoulder there and he could see that the main field was starting to come back and said, right, I'm off. But Bob, the speed he went round that corner, he nearly planted himself into the wall.
It looked like he almost came to a crasher. Here we're going to see a replay going so quickly up this climb, he has to stop almost to a complete standstill. They'll now re-accelerate. Unbelievable riding by Frank Schleck. Let's see if he still has a gap.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm sure he still will have the gap, but he lost a certain amount of his impetus going round that corner. This is amazing, the speed these guys go up. We're getting to the little number of hairpin corners towards the summit, and then there's that very scary left-hand bend which will start the descent. Schleck, he's going uphill, Bob, as if it's a flat.
He's absolutely flying up this climb. The riders in the peloton will have to get the time gap. He's getting near to the top and screaming up that climb. Rabobank on the front doing the work. Tom Boonen is right in there as well. Petacchi just a few riders down the line, but right at the front is the Rabobank squad in a pretty desperate situation right now. Frank Schleck trying to steal Milano San Remo.
Well, he may well steal the thunder away from the big teams we've been talking about all afternoon here. That was Koos Moodenhout. He's going backwards. We're moving a little bit further up the road. Who is surviving here? This is Frank Schleck still holding on to a certain amount of his advantage. Igor Astroloa moving up to the front as well in the red jersey of Team Barlow World. Now that would be a bit of a surprise. Thor Hushovd is not far away either. But the man locked in 4th or 5th position, Bob, all of the time. They're not getting rid of Tom Bonen.
Tom Bonen right in the front. We don't see a lot of his teammates. The only one left is right there on the left-hand side of your screen, and that is Frank Schleck. But Paolo Bettini still in the front group, though. Milram, that looks like Eric Zabel. He will be doing the lead out in the final few meters for Alessandro Patacchi if he's going to win Milano San Remo for the second time in succession. But all of them have to catch that man in the front. Frank Schleck, what a great ride. Team CSC not having a fantastic spring like they're used to, but if he could stay away to the end, that would wipe all of those bad memories away.
Certainly would. Well, he's looking for the big win. They had a win a couple of days ago with the time trial. That was Fabian Cancellara in Tirreno Adriatico. Bobby Julich won the opening prologue of Paris-Nice. Now, this is another move coming away from Lampre. Everybody now, Bob, this is a scramble. This is all a question of throwing caution to the wind. If you can get 10 seconds over the top of this climb, you've got a chance of a win. That looks like Alessandro Ballan. He's a man who's a big favourite, had a good start to the season so far this year. He won himself Trophy Leguelia, not too far away from here. So, Schleck, now you can see the pressure is starting to come on. He was going so fast just a few moments ago. Now the wind seems to be going out of his sails. That looked to me as if that was Astroloa going clear there in the red jersey. That's one of the riders from Barlow World. This is Euskaltel Euskadi. You don't often see them attack like this on the run in towards Milano San Remo. That was Sammy Sanchez as well. So, chaos at the front end of the race. This is Ballan. Look at this coming across here, Bob. Everybody's scrambling. Everybody's trying to survive. Very shortly, they're going to find that left-hand turn, and it is madness on the descent.
Ballan having a great Tirreno Adriatico leading into Milano San Remo. They're just being joined now by Igor Astarloa, the former world champion, on the very small Barlow World squad, and they're still chasing Frank Schleck.
Well, they're still chasing Frank Schleck, but the action is on. Everybody's trying to steal the thunder away from the sprinters, and they're looking now to see the final bend at the top of the Poggio, and then it's all downhill to the finish. Well, we'll take a very short break and come back and find out who's going to win La Primavera. Any minute now, these riders are going to take the left-hand bend, which every bike rider in the world knows, and there it is. The left-hand bend, which indicates the start of the descent of the Poggio. We've got a very interesting group of 3 riders going clear. There's Frank Schleck, who has been caught and passed. And now we have a different rider on the attack. It's Alessandro Ballan, a winner of Trophy Leguelia earlier this season, 3rd overall in Tirreno Adriatico. A very good performance by him. And here is the main field, and there you can see the lead out. Alessandro Patacchi's there. Tom Bonen is there. I didn't see Robbie McEwen or I didn't see Robbie Hunter.
This is a very tricky descent right now. Very tough to catch a breakaway, especially they have just come from a pretty select group. Tom Bonen is there, but we don't see a lot of his teammates from Quickstep, and that might give the breakaway a big chance to stay away to the finish line. Igor Astarloa just tacking onto the back. That's Alessandro Ballan. These are our leaders right here on the slopes of the Poggio, the descent coming down to the finish line. It's going to be very, very hard to catch these riders. And the rider on the back of there, the Quickstep man, hasn't had to do any work at all. He's in a great position to win this race.
Well, I tell you what, Bobo, you could be permitted to say 5 chilometro all'arrivo, because this is Italian, this is Milano San Remo, this is the race the Italians adore. La Primavera, the first race of springtime. And it's always exciting, it's always dramatic on the slopes and then on the descent of the Poggio. You have to throw caution to the wind here. Look at the organisation. Milram now, I think, panicking a fraction.
They had better start panicking right now, because Quickstep has a man up in the front group. I thought that might be Nick Noyens. He went out of the peloton, caught the breakaway with Igor Astarloa and Alessandro Ballan, and they have a great chance to stay to the finish line. Nick Noyens won't be required to do any work, so he'll be sitting on no mean sprinter himself. He could win Milano San Remo. It was a great move by Frank Schleck to demolish the peloton. A big chase coming from the group, and it has totally destroyed the willpower of the break. Frank Schleck now trying to claw his way back into the front group. We have 5 in the front on the road, including a Quick-Step rider, Igor Astarloa. Frank Schleck coming around there, just tacked onto the back.
Well, I think that's Nocentini getting in there as well from Acqua Saponi, so this indicates they're not going full bore down this descent. We now, Bob, have a leading breakaway of 5 riders, and they're coming across one at a time. That will be Sammy Sanchez coming across for Euskaltel Euskadi. I tell you what, I don't think a Spaniard has ever won Milan San Remo.
Well, that's a great move by Samuel Sanchez. He launched on the climb. He got dropped a little bit on the first couple of corners, but now he's found his rhythm. Look at these switchbacks. That's why it's so hard for the peloton to chase down a small group.
Well, I tell you what, they got the organisation. Pataki must be screaming at his men. There's a rider on the front there from Milram whipping it up to make sure. But Bob, the scary thing is once they get to the bottom, they've got to nail back that leading group of 5 riders, then try and organise themselves for the sprint.
Yes, it's not going to be easy to catch these men. If they don't start to look at each other and see who's going to do the pacemaking, and here we go. Now, you don't want to tripod around any of these corners, but if you have to, you've got to be done. Frank Schleck there just barely holding on. What a great maneuver there by Frank Schleck from Team CSC, who started this move, did an incredible acceleration up the Poggio, was joined by 4 other riders, and we see 3 kilometers to the finish. I don't think the peloton is going to catch the breakaway today.
Well, the sprinters very rarely lose out in Milano San Remo. This is regarded as the race for the sprinters. I think, you know, Bob, that rider from Quickstep at the front might be Pippo Pozzato, because that was the man we saw riding at the front on the Cipressa. At speeds like this, it's very difficult to get in there, but that is Pozzato, so that is a good move for Quickstep. They're tactically taking the advantage.
Pippo Pozzato, he has been a winner of classics himself, winning the Hugh Classic in Germany last season. He is a great sprinter as well, one of the fastest men in Italian cycling. He hasn't had to work so far in the breakaway because he might be waiting for Tom Boonen as well. And you can see him pull off there, not do any work. Now, this is what the breakaway cannot afford to do, is start looking at each other, and the peloton will be charging from behind. That's Astorlo and the all red with Sammy Sanchez from the Euskaltel Euskadi team. I don't think we could have ever predicted to have one of those riders in the breakaway before the finish.
Look at the gap. It's a big gap. It might not be enough, but it's around about 10 seconds with just 2 kilometers to go. Milram, the big squad, getting themselves organised on the front. This will be the organisation. There's a big move there going down the right-hand side. That you can see was the Caisse d'Epargne, and that was Sebastian Ino trying to sort it out for Thor Hushoff. They know they've got to nail it back now. They cannot mess about in the front. Sammy Sanchez is looking at these guys saying, come on, we've got a chance, we've got the gap, we've got to keep going. Now it's Ballan says, I've got a chance to win this. Frank Schleck, he's recovered. This, Bob, is tactically playing against the breakaway now, because if they slow down, the main field is just going to gobble them up.
The joker in the breakaway, Pippo Pozzato, not working, attacks coming right and left, but look at the organization by the Milram squad. That might spell disaster. Sammy Sanchez now on the attack, Igor Asoloa chasing him, Pozzato not doing any work and ruining the cooperation in the breakaway.
Oh, Bob, very shortly we're going to see 1 kilometre to go. That's a great move there by Sammy Sanchez. He was nailed back immediately there by the rest of that group. But these little accelerations and decelerations are not good for the breakaway. There is the ultimo kilometro. Are we going to see a Spanish winner, or are the main field going to come back just at the last moment? We're inside 1,000 metres. We're turning off the Via Aurelia. Very shortly they'll take a right-hand turn. They will be in the Via Roma.
Via Roma, the last few hundred meters of the bike race. Sammy Sanchez just hanging on to a slight advantage. Last corner there. Now it's a drag race to the finish line, and there's the peloton right on the wheel of the breakaway.
They have been caught inside the final kilometre. It's still disorganisation at the front end of the main field. Oscar Freire is in a great position. Tom Boonen is in about 8th position now. You can see the move here coming. That's Nocentini and Igor Astroloa trying to get it together. But Bob, it is such chaos when you come together with 400 metres to go. This is one of the most famous avenues in the world. The sprint has started. Pippo Pozzato has come out of that group. Is he going to surprise everybody here? 250 metres to go. The sprinters are now trying to wind it up. Robbie Hunter's in there. I can see the green jersey of Team Phonak. But where is Alessandro Pataki coming up through the middle? Pozzato may well have created the surprise here. Inside 50 metres, it's Pippo Pozzato gets the win. Bowden is third. What an unbelievable solution. What a great ride. That was Bettini. He is happy with the move there as well.
Tom Boonen, none other than the world champion, congratulating Filippo Pozzato, the winner. What a great ride by the Quick-Step squad. So many weapons to use and totally impossible to beat today.
Well, I think one of the integral parts of that victory there would have to be Paolo Bettini. He was the man who sorted it out for the team. Bob, they did a great performance there, Team Quick-Step. They used every tactic possible. They brought in Paolo Bettini trying to fight through the crowd there to see Pippo Pozzato. This was the leading group of 6 riders. This was an unbelievable move by Pozzato. Cold-blooded, waiting till the last moment, and then boom.
Not having to work in the breakaway, that's a huge advantage. He's a very fast sprinter himself. It was Nocentini leading out the sprint, but Pozzato opening up a clear gap there. You can see the peloton led all day by the Milram squad, just starting to lose a little bit of their power in the last few hundred meters. And what a great ride, not only by Pozzato, but by the whole Quick-Step team. Didn't have to work in the breakaway and had just enough energy. Here comes the windup of the sprint. Pataki has him in his sights, but just can't quite get there.
Well, I have to say, Bob, if Pipo Pozzato hadn't surprised everybody there, I'd have beaten you in our bet, because it was Pataki who got second and Tom Boonen third. And here are the results brought to us by TIAA Cref. Filippo Pozzato getting himself the win for Team Quick-Step ahead of Alessandro Pataki and Luca Paolini. And with those early celebrations, Tom Boonen crossed the line still in fourth place. And I might have said I didn't think a Spaniard had ever won Milan San Remo, but I'd kind of forgotten the excitement about a man by the name of Oscar Freire. Stefano Garzelli put in a good sprint to get seventh, and Alessandro Ballan, one of the survivors of that breakaway, crossed the line in eighth. Well, that brings us to the John Hancock performance moment. It would have to be the moment when Pipo Pozzato just caught Ronaldo Nocentini inside the last kilometre, waited for a fraction of a second, then bounced into the lead. It was that moment, that gut feeling, that gut reaction that gave Pipo Pozzato the victory today in Milan San Remo. That was your John Hancock performance moment. Well, probably one of the youngest winners of Milan San Remo in recent years, 24 years of age. This man, Filippo Pozzato, Bob, this has got to be his greatest ever win.
Greatest, biggest, most gigantic win of his career. So thrilled to win this for any Italian, any bike racer, especially the Italians, on home soil. The biggest race of Italian cycling. Filippo Pozzato, just 24 years old, very pleased to win the race for his team, Quick-Step. They had the big favorite going in, Tom Boonen. But for himself, a great victory, and he'll savor this for the rest of his career.
Well, tactically, another thing to say, Bob, about that victory of his as well, that was not coordinated by the team manager. That victory, when you make that move, it's a gut instinct feeling.
Mario Cipollini now on the podium with Pozzato. Absolutely, Paul. That's a gut instinct on the Poggio. Pozzato sensing that the breakaway was going to be very dangerous, covering the move by Igor Osterloh and Frank Schleck. He sat on the wheels throughout the finale. In the last 400 meters, he was able to get the win.
Well, Milano San Remo once again lived up to its reputation and gave us a great race. And don't forget, next Sunday we're back. OLN's in France for the 75th Criterium International cycling race, a grueling two-day race with a flat stage, a mountain stage and an individual time trial. And don't forget, last year Bobby Julich was the overall winner, and this year's winner of Paris-Nice, Floyd Landis, is going to be starting there as well. Cyclism Sundays on OLN next Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Pacific. And for a more complete schedule of all of the cycling events here on OLN, log into our website at olntv.com. Great ride there by Filippo Pozzato, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of him later on in the season. Up here next on OLN is the AFL, as the Carolina Crush take on the Los Angeles Avengers. On behalf of Bob Roll, I'm Paul Sherwen saying we'll be back next week.